If somebody came and asked you today where you come from, what would you say?
I say I'm from Africville. I always say it, and all my friends and everyone I know from Africville, that's where when they're asked where they're from, they say Africville.
Africville.
And be proud of it?
And be very proud of it. Be very proud of it. And I ain't not giving you no shit now, I'm telling you God's truth.
About the situation of Africville. Africville should go back to the people.
I came here tonight expecting some answers to some questions that I've been asking my family for a long time. Why did they do that to the people? What I want to know, did you use Africville for a test? Were they guinea pigs for something new? Integration, that is my question, because I still, sitting here tonight listening to you, do not understand exactly what took place.
We accepted the advice of city staff, the advice of an outside expert, Albert Rose, and the advice of the Human Rights Advisory Committee. Second, we, the members of the council, chose relocation over all other alternatives.
Halifax, Nova Scotia. In 1989, this public forum gathered together some of the decision makers and many of the former residents of Africville. They met to re-examine and re-evaluate the decision taken in 1964 to relocate 400 people who lived in Africville, a small black settlement on the shores of Bedford Basin.
We all live in our own homes out here. Detached homes, where our children can run around. We couldn't go and live in no apartments today. Segregated, not segregated, but discriminated as we are. Anything happened, the first thing they're going to do is blame us. The Negroes is who done it.
We're free here. We're not contained with this, we're not mixed up with this environment of prejudice or anything. We're people by ourselves.
We never asked nobody for nothing.
Well, Africville to me at a young age was my universe. To me that was the world, just the basin and the hills around in Africville.
I remember coming home from school. You could look over and everybody's house was painted a different color, like rainbow. My golly, it was pretty.
The community itself meant so much. Playing, swimming, wake up in the morning, run right down, have a nice gravy, jump right off the rock in the water, tied in a rope.
Baseball? I didn't go too far, was that? No, I didn't. Because I had to do work. I had to work. Yeah.
It was a special day, a day that you would never forget. We would sing all the way down to the water side. They take you one by one and baptize you.
I'll never forget that picture. I'll never forget it. Oh, you had to see it. To believe it, you had to see it.
And when I first arrived in Halifax in 1957, I walked along Barrington Street and I saw no colored people. In those days we were colored. We were not yet black. Some of us were Negroes. And so I said to my friends, where are the colored people of Halifax? And they said to me, They live in a place called Africville. And I asked, where is Africville? I would like to see Africville. Would someone take me to Africville, where the pavement ended? Africville began. I did not see the flowers.
For over 100 years, this tightly knit community survived with its own school, post office, and church. The city of Halifax collected taxes from homeowners, but did not provide the residents with basic services like paved roads, running water, and sewers.
As we drove through Africville, I could see the concrete pipes, which they explained to me were the sewer pipes that led material from Halifax City into the harbor. I did not see the flowers. And where Africville ended, the city dump began. And as we drove through the dump, I saw my brothers scavenging on the dump. I did not see the flowers.
I think the majority of the people from Africville felt the dump was a blessing, because through the dump we were able to get the materials that we couldn't afford to buy. What other people threw away: windows, boards, nails, furniture. I used to go to the dump in the morning. I used to collect metals, bottles, anything salvageable. We used to salvage and sell back to the city.
It was sometime around Christmas when we picked up a newspaper. And in it was the story of a family in Africville that had been burning old car batteries which had been scavenged on the dump to keep them warm. And as a result of burning those batteries, the family was lead poisoned and had to be taken to the hospital. And I asked myself the question, God, what is this? What is this?
Over the years, there was sporadic talk that something should be done about Africville. But by the early 60s, several official reports from City Hall recommended relocation as the only viable solution.
The folks up here have been going to the city to find out about the roads, the lights, the garbage, and what's the use? It made no difference. You see, the condition of Africville today, this should have never been. If the city had took care of this place, or say, help out, instead of being neglecting it, it would have been a lot better than what it is today.
Africville obviously must be redeveloped, and sometimes some people need to be shown that certain things are not in their own best interests and not in the best interest of their children. Now, you do this, you want to take these projects certainly by persuasion to, rather certainly you don't coerce people against their will, but should there be violations of minimum standards, then you have no alternative but to enforce the law, and this is universal for everybody.
You know, in those days, under the National Housing Act, a great deal was happening across the country in terms of removing neighborhoods that had a lot of housing that wasn't up to the minimum standards that the bylaws and so on called for. And this was part of that wave of trying to improve living conditions on the housing front.
The city wants to redevelop it over our people, and I don't think that is fair. I think we should have a chance to redevelop our property as well as anybody else. It's our property been for the last 200 years. It's one thing in this, when you're in this country and you own a piece of property, you're not a second-class citizen. That's why my people own this land. They work for it, they toil for it, and they work to get this little piece of land that they own, and they try to hang on it. But when your land is being taken away from you and you ain't offered nothing, then you become a peasant in any man's country.
I don't think anyone should be proud of particularly, but I think that the total Halifax community was somewhat embarrassed by the degree of publicity about so-called slum as part of the city, and so some action was pushed on us by that particular feeling.
I often said to newspapers who came and said that there was a slum, I resented it, and I still resent anyone who calls Africville a slum. Slum usually are people who are renters and a place where the homeowners won't keep the property up. But they were a proud people. They did the best they could. I remember, for instance, they saw how Africville people were on the welfare. And so I did some research with some friends of mine, and I found that there were, in proportion, there were more white people in Halifax on welfare than the people in Africville.
Africville people were people who didn't blow the top. They lived there, and unless you looked down over the hill, maybe you thought they were all in Bedford Basin, but they were still down there living, minding their own business, because we didn't need anybody else. We didn't need to go to anybody. They made their living, they worked on different companies, and they worked and paid their taxes. They can't say that the people in Africville were squatters, because the ones who paid taxes paid a whole lot of taxes for those who were squatters.
In the testing time, that is the time that we need that same God. And we feel that is coming very handy. For men is waxing worse and worse. And friends, I want to say, if every time you want to stand by your God, it's now. Together we stand, divided we fall.
There was only really one viable organization that you could say spoke for the people, and that was the Africville Church. In a very real sense, the black people in the wider community of our province were not sensitive enough to unite, to come together, and to fight this blatant denial of people's human rights.
At that time, the civil rights movement was getting going in the United States. And Martin Luther King was talking about the brotherhood of man and of each of us being our brother's keepers. When I was invited to attend a meeting dealing with Africville and the decision of the city fathers of Halifax to remove the residents from Africville, I figured I had to be there. When Alan Borovoy met and spoke with the group, and we organized the Halifax Citizens Human Rights Advisory Committee with a mandate to do what we could to assist the residents of Africville.
Unless you are willing and able to raise hell you don't get. I don't want anyone to get the impression that I'm opposed to reason. Pressure without reason is irresponsible, but reason without pressure is ineffectual. And if the Africville people were not adequately involved in the process by which their lives were determined, it's quite clear because they didn't have an organization that had the clout and could exert the pressure on their behalf. And it's strange to me how many things are written about this subject. I don't mean only Africville, I mean urban renewal and all of these subjects, and how many times people wring their hands and say, the people weren't consulted, they didn't have an organization, and how commensurately little attention is paid to the question of how to find seed money for indigenous peoples' organizations. Unless we even consider this question, tomorrow's Africvilles will be no less screwed than yesterday's.
At that time, people were not concerned by us. They always had that self-styled God complex, that you could not think, that you could not make decisions, that we do all your decision-making for you. And that was what happened in Africville. They went through the exercise of having meetings with the people there, but behind it all, decisions had already been made. That was prime land. That was important land. That this kind of land was not for the black people.
The whole thing in the eggshell was us. We was all accumulated as one. Because we were black, that's the reason why the city wanted to get us out of there. That's the only one reason why.
I think what you have to do is do your utmost to see that these folks are provided with housing as close as possible to what they would find acceptable, and yet it must conform to minimum standards.
Living conditions. That was one of the things that they used against us. The city saying that our living conditions they were substandard, and even today in some of the articles that you might read, you'll see living conditions brought up quite often. Maybe they weren't up to standard to the people who set the standards, but to us, that was home, no matter what the houses looked like. There were other communities, and not just black communities, that had also the same type of living conditions, if not worse. But we were close to the city, and we were predominantly black. So our living conditions were used as a reason to move us. Even though our situation could have been easily upgraded with some plumbing, some paved roads, the city wouldn't give us this.
City government will have to do more for them to help them acquire a site if they have the competency to do so. And
the money, in other words.
The money, provide the, you will have to give a greater measure of financial assistance and guidance in order to help them overcome the discrimination that does exist. This is a problem, and the only way that you can solve it is to do so with the understanding that well-trained social caseworkers can bring to bear on it. And there must be, in the leadership among the community, an understanding that what is being done in the total public interest, including the best welfare of these people themselves and their children.
You didn't go in and say, look, today is your turn to move. My mandate was to go in and discuss the move with people and what they might expect in another area. I suppose pressure came from within. As people moved, then, you know, here were people left, and your neighbor was going, and the next neighbor, and the next neighbor, and here you were alone. So maybe in that way there was pressure.
We couldn't fight. Couldn't do no fighting. And then again, we had nothing to fight with.
I remember the city saying to these people, if you're not out of there by the time the bulldozer gets finished with one home, then your home will be bulldozed over. You won't give the $500. You won't get the $500 the city is promising to give people. You won't get a home for a home, and we won't help you.
When someone agreed to move or be moved, that same day they tore their house down. So when you woke up the next day and looked around, you found that Mrs. Brown's house over there was no longer there, and that really, well, that had a psychological effect upon people too. So this was the method which they used, and when you find yourself, you know, all the desolation all around you, it sort of softens you up to decide when you might as well move too as well.
I've been here so long, you know, it doesn't make any difference to me. But is the young people, they got their life to live. Well, I'm over that now. I'm a woman my age. All I'm putting my trust in God to spare me. I don't know what hour or what minute I may go. But still, I love my home. And this house here was one of the best houses in the settlement.
We were under the impression then if they said move, you go. They said come, you come, and all that. And you see, those things then, you just went along with it. It would have never happened today. And I remember my son coming home one night and he said, Mom, he said, the church is gone. This is about 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, you know, young people being out. And I said, oh, no. I said, it can't be. I said, it can't be. I said, no, Mom, he said, it's flat to the ground. And you know, that was done in the early hours of the morning. It seemed to be such a cruel thing to me to do that to a church. You know, I never really could understand that, why it wasn't done.
I remember church going down. I was one of them young fellows who looked at early that morning. I remember the city truck going there. I was saying, you can't tear the church down. The people ain't gone yet. Yeah, it's just got to come down. We can remember. I can remember the trucks coming in. I remember Mrs. Mountley's house, Mrs. Sarah Mountley. Tore it down, never took a stitch of furniture, gave her time to take a stitch of furniture out of her home and knocked it down. They bulldozed it. Mr. Jamesy Stewart was in the hospital, Campbell Hospital, and they bulldozed his house down. The man didn't even know. He come out the hospital and had no place to go. You know, these are things I remember. I don't forget them.
I remember my first bad experience on the relocation of Africville was we used to have it was a little shed that no one used anymore. But us young guys, we used to use it as a hangout, sort of place where we went and hung out. And we used to sometimes spend the night there. And I remember this morning we were in there and a bulldozer was coming through it and the wall was coming down and we were able to get out. Now that was my first real experience with relocation. Now we could have been killed. We were lucky to be able to get out of there.
They took our homes. They moved us out of Africville in the city garbage trucks. We had a lot better out there than some places they put us in the city. They put us right in, a lot of us, down in the slums. The meanest part that they did to Africville, they got the older people, the old people together. They didn't want to hear anything from the younger generation because they simply knew that the older people didn't have any education. What is $500 to a 75-year-old Negro? He thinks he's rich. What can he do? He can't even, we haven't even got enough to put down one payment for a home. Nothing. I'm living on welfare. I think a whole lot of us, when we came in this city, we had to go on welfare. When we lived in that city of Africville, you look in the records and see how many Africville people had to humble and come to the city for welfare. We were too independent. We didn't want it. We earned our own living, and we earned it the honest way. Our boys never had so much trouble until they came in the city.
We have attempted or offered alternative accommodation in our public housing projects. Where these are not immediately available and where we've made settlements, we will move them into city-owned properties. Now, granted, many of these are in the older areas. Many of them are scheduled for ultimate demolition. But as an initial move, they are basically better than the accommodation that's available in the Africville area.
All this is owned by Central Mortgage and Housing. You can't do anything to it personally yourself. Like, you can't put anything in it, change the fixtures or anything, because it belongs to the city, right? Like you can see, there's no grass. There's only concrete, no open spaces. When we were out home, out in Africville, we had a lot of open spaces where we could play, and that was all taken away from us. It destroys people's sense of, being who they are, knowing who they are. You're just like another number, number on the block. That's all you are. You don't have no separate identity because everything's the same.
I think we undervalued then the importance of a sense of community. If I were a member of the City Council today and this proposition had come before us, I think I would have said, and I think probably every member of the City Council would say today, well, a council better go down there and hold public hearings in the church and listen to the residents directly.
Imagine for a moment a young person living in Africville. Okay. You're living with your parents. You're given a small piece of land by your father or your grandparents. But you live home. You build your home on that piece of land. You pay cash for everything. It takes 2 years or more of hard work. And you put every penny and every free moment into building this home. Your brother's a carpenter. Your cousin is a bricklayer. 2 years later, you have a home. A piece of land. Mortgage free. My generation has been deprived of this opportunity. We'll struggle for everything we get because someone decided that the land of Africville would serve the city better as industrial land. They should think again.
My grandmother and a lot of the other people of Africville did not want to leave their community. A long tradition of people of family and heritage is in the community, and we didn't want to leave. She cried when she had to leave. She was never happy after she left. I believe that the relocation took away 5 years minimum from the lives of our loved ones, of our elders, that we lost because of the move.
Do you enjoy talking about Africville?
No, I don't.
Why not?
Because it hurts me.
Why is that, Mr. Steed? Why does it hurt you to talk about Africville?
Because it's one of the nicest little communities I ever lived in. And to tell you something, I've been around this world twice. I've never met a place like Africville. Never.
But Mr. Steed, everybody thought it was such a bad place.
Who?
All the people who tore it down.
Oh, the people that tore it down. That's the people that tore it down, the city of Halifax, the authorities of the city of Halifax.
They said it was a bad place.
That's what they called it. But it was not to us, it was a heaven, a home, a real home.
Alcock, Alexander, Anderson, Berryman, Bowles, Brown, Byers, Carter, Carvery, Cassidy, Desmond, Dixon, Downey, Emerson, Carroll, Ferguson, Fletcher, Flint, Gannon, Grant, Hamilton, Howe, Izzard, Johnson, Jones, Kane, Keeler, Kellum, Lawrence, McDonald, Mantley, Mary, Mersman, Medley, Newman, Nichols, Pennell, Parrots, Perry, Roan, Skinner, Sparks, Steed, Stewart, Thomas, Tolliver.
When you read an article about Africville, you're sure to find the phrase sense of loss. It's always there. It's the phrase that really describes what we feel, a sense of loss. Now, some of us were relocated to Uniacke Square in the downtown area, and we adapted to that community. But something was missing because we didn't grow up there. You adopt it, you accept it, but it's just not mine. It belongs to the people whose parents and grandparents lived and died there. This community simply is not mine. Once a year, we venture out to Africville for our reunion. You set up your tent, you set up your camper, or you throw a blanket on the grass. The children are playing, people are laughing and hugging and reminiscing about the old days. But for 3 days, you have your community back. You stop for just one moment. You smell the salt water air, and you say, now this is mine.
I think we have to remember that you can take away my property, okay? And you can take away some of the other things the material things that we may possess, but you can't take away the spirit, okay? So I just want everybody who feels as I do to understand that it's something that will live on, and we have a responsibility, both ourselves and our kids, to keep the memory alive, and we will do it. And one thing we'll do is to make sure, to the extent that we can, that something like this never happens again. Never.
Africville, Africville, no more can I call you home. Africville, Africville, I want to go home. I was born on the shores of the Bedford Basin a long time ago. All the families lived there as one, you know. There was no other place we needed to go. So Africville, Africville, no more can I call you home. Africville, Africville, I want to go home. So the city of Halifax has taken our lands and they turned it into a park. And we love the place where we live so dear. So Africville was a part of my heart. Oh, Africville, Africville, I want to go home. Africville, Africville, I want to go home. Back to
In 1990, 20 years since the relocation, the Africville Genealogy Society prepares to fight City Hall. Halifax City Council voted to permit the construction of an industrial service road to run alongside Seaview Park. The proposed route would cross over the foundations of the Seaview Baptist Church.